In the stillness of the graveyard, the wealthy man collapsed to his knees in front of his child's headstone, crying as though his own soul had been torn away. What he could never have imagined was that the daughter he mourned was breathing, watching, and carrying a secret powerful enough to shatter everything he believed. The burial ground lay quiet, wrapped in a cold air that seeped beneath clothing and into bone. John Harrison moved through the rows by himself, his steps heavy and unsteady, his posture bent as if his spirit had been laid to rest along with his little girl. 2 months had passed since he had laid Isabella into the earth, a loss that had arrived without warning or mercy. The tragedy had begun when the 2-year-old was sent to spend a short weekend at a secluded cabin in the forests of upstate New York, owned by her stepmother Stella. Stella had always appeared gentle with the child, offering warmth and care that seemed sincere. But while she was away in the city on business, disaster struck. A fierce blaze swallowed the cabin whole. When firefighters searched through the ruins, they found nothing but charred remains and fragments of the child's belongings, scorched beyond recognition. John never questioned the conclusion. Consumed by sorrow, he accepted that his daughter was gone. Since that day, he existed in a fog of grief, held upright only by Stella's almost motherly tenderness as she drowned in guilt for not being present, and by the unwavering support of his younger brother Mark. Mark, his business partner in constant shadow, repeated the same reassurance day after day. "I'll take care of the company. Just focus on surviving. I'm here with you, brother." Now, kneeling before the stone, John finally allowed the full weight of his loss to crush him. His fingers traced the icy letters carved into the granite as his voice broke through sobs. "My sweet girl, sleep peacefully. How can I ever find rest when you're no longer here?" His tears spilled freely, soaking the ground beneath him. From his coat pocket, he drew out a small silver bracelet, the present he had given her on her most recent birthday. He cradled it in his palm as if it were her tiny hand. "You said you'd always stay with me," he whispered hoarsely. "I don't even know how to breathe without you now." His body trembled as the words left him. Inside his mind, torment raged. If only I had gone with her. If only I had arrived sooner. The questions repeated endlessly, offering no relief. Shame and regret wrapped around his heart, convincing him he had failed in the one role that mattered most. The same rage that had consumed the cabin now burned inside his chest. "I would give up everything," he murmured, lifting his gaze toward the sky as though it might answer him. "All of it, my angel, just to hold you once more." At that exact moment, something unseen unfolded. Several steps away, partially concealed behind the thick trunk of a tree, Isabella stood alive. Her body was thin, her eyes swollen with tears as she stared at her father without making a sound. She had escaped from the place where she had been kept captive, but fear still ruled her every breath. Her heart hammered so violently it felt ready to break free. One hand dug into the rough bark as silent tears traced paths down her cheeks. Watching her father so completely destroyed was a pain no child should ever endure. She leaned forward instinctively, then froze and pulled back, choking down a cry. Her thoughts collided in panic. "Go to him. Wrap your arms around him. Let him see you're alive." "No, I can't. If they discover I escape, they could hurt him too." The conflict crushed her. Every part of her wanted to call out, to run to him, but she knew that revealing herself now could bring consequences far worse than her silence. From her hiding place, she heard John's shattered voice once more. "I swear to you, my daughter, I'll keep going even though I feel dead inside." Each word made it harder to stay hidden. She pressed her teeth into her lip until she tasted blood, forcing herself to remain still. The bond between them pulled like a living thing, almost impossible to resist. Yet fear outweighed longing, locking her in place. When John finally struggled to his feet, pressing the bracelet to his chest as if it were a sacred charm, Isabella shut her eyes and let another tear fall. The world was too merciless to grant them their reunion just yet. From the shadows beneath the tree, she understood she had no choice but to wait. That embrace would have to be delayed, even though the waiting was tearing her apart. Back inside her place of captivity, Isabella moved with shallow steps, her shoulders drawn inward as though even the walls might expose her. Earlier that evening, she had summoned the courage to flee for a brief moment, driven by a desperate need to see her father and remind herself that life still existed beyond that living nightmare. Now she rushed back, heart pounding, terrified that someone might notice she had been gone. She couldn't afford mistakes. Until then, she had never clearly heard voices or seen faces, only vague shapes and whispers that kept her confined, as though her world had been reduced to fear and quiet darkness. She still had no idea who was holding her there. But that night would strip away every unknown. She stretched out on the thin, battered mattress and forced herself to lie still, pretending to be asleep. The room pressed in on her like a sealed grave, heavy and suffocating. She squeezed her eyes shut, yet a sound slipped through the silence: laughter. Voices. Low conversation drifting in from the corridor. Her pulse surged. Moving as cautiously as if one wrong motion could cost her life, she lifted herself upright. Her bare feet slid across the icy floor as she crept toward the door, which stood slightly ajar. A dim yellow glow spilled in from the living area beyond. She leaned closer, and the words she overheard shattered her reality. "It's already been 2 months, Mark," Stella said, her voice calm but laced with cruelty. No one doubted anything. Everyone bought the fire. Mark answered with a slow, mocking laugh, sinking deeper into the couch. "And your foolish husband? How's he handling it?" "Still sobbing like a wreck. Convinced his little girl is dead. If only he knew." Stella chuckled, lifting her wine glass. "Let him weep." Her tone sharpened with satisfaction. "The inheritance is finally being secured. I've started the paperwork myself. And the poison is working gradually, just as planned. John doesn't realize that every cup of tea I make is pushing him closer to the end." Isabella went rigid. Poison. Her legs nearly gave out. Tears flooded her eyes without warning. The gentle voice that had once soothed her to sleep was now dripping with malice. Across from Stella, Uncle Mark sat relaxed and pleased. "The irony is perfect," he said with a grin. "He trusts you more than anyone. And you're the one ending his life. Genius move, Stella. Absolutely genius." Their laughter blended together, sharp and predatory, like hunters savoring a helpless victim. "He deserves it," Stella continued, her eyes glowing with delight. "For years he paraded around as the mighty John Harrison. Now he's broken on his knees and completely unaware. Soon they'll call it a natural death, an unfortunate coincidence, and we'll walk away as the rightful heirs." Mark lifted his glass. "To our success, and to the downfall of that pathetic man." They sealed the toast with a heated kiss. Isabella clamped her hands over her mouth, fighting the scream that threatened to escape. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her thoughts spinning out of control. "They're the ones who took me. It was them all along." The truth crashed down on her, hollowing her out. The figures she had once trusted, the woman she called stepmother and the uncle she believed in, were the monsters. The horror was so overwhelming that she staggered backward, nearly stumbling as the wooden floor creaked beneath her. The terror of being caught sent violent tremors through her body. She pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide, sobs burning in her throat. Panic closed in, stealing her breath. Her father wasn't only grieving a child who was still alive. He was unknowingly swallowing his own death, one cup at a time. "They're going to kill him. I can't let that happen," she thought wildly, her mind unraveling. Tears streamed down her face, but beneath them, something else ignited. A fierce, desperate resolve born from the knowledge that she carried a truth too dangerous to remain hidden. While the betrayers celebrated in the next room, Isabella curled into herself on the mattress once more, feigning sleep, silently praying that no one would realize she had been awake. Deep down, she understood that her father's survival was balanced on a razor's edge, and that only she, frail, frightened and worn thin by terror, stood between him and the next strike. The hours of darkness dragged on without mercy as Isabella remained still on the unforgiving mattress, her gaze locked on the narrow window above her, staring into the outside world. Every word spoken by Stella and Mark echoed endlessly in her head, pounding like a merciless verdict. "They destroyed my childhood, deceived my father, and now they want him dead too." Each realization struck her heart with brutal force. Her small frame shook, yet inside her something fierce ignited. A desperate resolve that could no longer be contained. She knew that staying meant losing him forever. From the depths of her fear, a bravery she never knew she possessed began to rise. She waited, barely breathing, until the house fell completely silent. The mocking laughter vanished, footsteps disappeared, and only the distant howl of wind brushing against the windows remained. Slowly, carefully, Isabella stood. She crept to the rear window and gently pushed against the warped, rusted wood. The hinge groaned loudly and she froze, terror flooding her veins. Her heart hammered as she waited. Nothing happened. Summoning every ounce of courage, she inhaled sharply and slipped through the opening, dropping onto the icy ground outside. Pain shot through her body, forcing her to bite down hard to keep from crying out. She stayed low for a moment, glancing back, half expecting shadows to emerge at any second. Then she ran. The forest showed no mercy. Twigs cracked beneath her feet, sounding far too loud in the stillness. The cold sliced at her skin, and sharp stones tore into her bare soles, but she refused to slow. Her love for her father drowned out every ache. I have to get to him. I have to stop them. They've already begun poisoning him. The thoughts thundered in her mind as her unsteady legs pushed forward. The night felt endless. Hunger gnawed at her, exhaustion pressed down on her. Yet nothing could force her to quit. When dawn finally began to color the sky, Isabella spotted the first outlines of the city streets. Relief burst through her, tears blending with sweat and fatigue as her heart raced even faster. Staggering, she reached the gates of John's mansion. The towering barrier looked insurmountable, but her determination outweighed its height. Gathering what little strength remained, she struck the door, tentatively at first, then with growing urgency. "Dad! Dad!" she whispered, barely aware she was speaking. Footsteps approached from inside. Her breath caught. The door opened and there stood John, hollow-eyed, drained, his face etched with grief. The moment his eyes fell on her, he went rigid, as though time itself had stopped. His lips parted without sound, his hands shaking. "Isabella!" The word escaped him as a fragile breath, filled with disbelief. Without hesitation, she launched herself into his arms. The collision released everything they had held inside. He clutched her tightly, sobbing openly, tears soaking into his beard as he repeated again and again. "It's you. It's really you. My child. I can't believe it." Isabella buried her face against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent she had thought she'd lost forever. For long moments they stayed locked together, as if the rest of the world no longer existed. Through her tears, she finally pulled back just enough to look at him. "Dad, you have to hear me," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't die in that fire. I was never alone there. Everything was arranged. Stella and Uncle Mark set the blaze to make everyone believe I was gone." John gripped her shoulders, staring at her in shock, his mind unable to grasp her words. "What are you saying? Stella? Mark?" His voice cracked, caught between denial and agony. "That can't be possible." Still crying but unwavering, Isabella went on. "I heard them myself. They mocked you. They said 2 months passed and no one suspected anything." She swallowed hard before delivering the final blow. "And it doesn't stop there, Dad. Stella has already started poisoning you. Every cup of tea, every dish she serves is laced with poison," Isabella said, her voice tumbling over itself in panic. "They want your death to look ordinary so they can take everything you own. You're the next target, Dad." The words rushed out of her, urgent and breathless, as though each second of delay could cost him his life. John staggered backward, dragging his hands down his face as a guttural cry of fury tore from his chest. The realization crashed over him like a landslide. For weeks he had mourned like a man buried alive, grieving the child he believed he had lost forever. Now that grief twisted into something darker and far more dangerous. His hands curled into fists, his eyes hardened, and the tears that once came from sorrow now burned with rage. "They will answer for this," he growled, his voice rising. "Both of them. For every tear I shed. For every night they stole from me. And from you." He pulled her into his arms again, holding her with a strength that bordered on desperation. "You were brave to get away, my girl. From now on it's you and me. We fight this together." Later, John paced the length of his study, back and forth, his face flushed, the veins in his temples pulsing. His hands trembled with barely contained anger, yet his eyes never left Isabella, who stood quietly nearby, still shaken from her escape. The truth weighed heavily on him, his thoughts racing uncontrollably. "My own brother!" he shouted, slamming his clenched fist onto the polished desk. "And the woman I trusted with my home, traitors. The sharp crack echoed through the room, though it was no louder than his labored breathing. Isabella stepped closer, worry tightening her chest. She feared his fury might push him into reckless action. "Dad, they're dangerous," she said carefully, though her tone was steady. "You can't confront them like this. If they find out I'm alive, they'll try to erase us both." John inhaled slowly, forcing himself to calm down. He rubbed his face, then dropped to his knees in front of her, taking her small hands in his. "You're right," he said quietly. "I won't let them harm you again. Never." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only when John spoke again, his voice low but resolute. "If we're going to beat them, we have to play by their rules. They believe I'm weak, already halfway to the grave. Let them keep believing it." Isabella frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" A cold, bitter smile touched his lips. "I'll pretend I'm dying. I'll give them the illusion of victory until the precise moment we rip it away from them." A chill ran through her. The plan sounded terrifying, reckless even. Yet the certainty in her father's eyes left no room for doubt. She swallowed and asked softly, "And what about me?" John tightened his grip on her hands. "If they realize you've vanished again, suspicion will follow. They might come after you, finish what they started. I won't gamble with your life." He paused, then continued. "You'll have to return to where they're holding you and stay hidden for one more week. During that time, I'll act sicker every day, right up until the moment they think I'm done. After that week, you escape again and meet me at the old iron bridge in Central Park in the afternoon. There's a cracked plaque there. You know the spot." She nodded slowly. Between them, a shared understanding began to form. An unspoken bond forged through pain and resolve. Sitting together, father and daughter began to map out every step. John explained the strategy with controlled precision, though his eyes revealed a man ready for war. "I'll withdraw from everyone," he said. "Cancel meetings. Stay isolated. Look fragile. They can't suspect that I know anything." Isabella's heart pounded. But what if the poisoning continues? He gently brushed her cheek. "I won't accept a single thing from their hands, not even water. From today on, I take nothing they offer." His expression sharpened. "They believe they're controlling me, but in truth, we're the ones directing this game." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes again, but this time they weren't born solely of fear. Alongside it was something new, quiet pride. For the first time, she wasn't only the child being protected. She was part of the fight. She was no longer just a victim, she was a combatant. John pulled her into his arms once more, but this time the embrace carried a different force. It wasn't born of grief. It was the clasp of partners. "They believe we're broken, Isabella," he said quietly. "But standing together, we're stronger than they could ever imagine." Within that suffocating room, with only silent walls as witnesses, an unbreakable agreement was forged. Father and daughter were bound not only by blood, but now by a shared hunger for justice. Sorrow gave way to calculation. As morning light poured through the window, igniting the air like flame, it became clear that the betrayer's end was inevitable. All that remained was patience, waiting for the precise second to act. John disappeared into the role he had crafted, committing himself to the deception with meticulous care. Appointments were cancelled. Business contacts were pushed away. He shut himself inside his estate, presenting the image of a man rapidly declining. At first, whispers circulated. Tycoon John Harrison reportedly unwell. Gradually, the narrative took shape. He practiced relentlessly, ragged breathing, unfocused eyes, sluggish steps, until even the mirror believed the lie. Then came the turning point. Radios crackled. Newspapers printed bold headlines. "John Harrison passes away. Cause, cardiac failure." The nation reeled. Associates, investors, and competitors alike were stunned. The story was airtight, reinforced by carefully arranged medical documents and emotional statements from loyal staff. Hidden from view, John observed the aftermath, his spirit torn in half, one part aching as he watched his own existence erased, the other burning with the promise of retribution. The funeral unfolded like a grand drama. The church overflowed. Cameras flashed non-stop, capturing every gesture. Stella delivered a flawless performance, draped in black, tears flowing beneath her veil. "I've lost the love of my life," she whispered, embodying the image of a shattered widow. Mark followed, stepping forward with a steady yet trembling voice. I lost my brother, my partner, my closest friend. His absence leaves a void that can never be filled. The crowd stood in solemn respect. Applause rose. Many wept alongside them. The illusion was complete. From inside a nearby vehicle, John watched with his stomach twisting. He saw Mark reach for Stella's hand, their fingers entwining in a gesture too intimate to be innocent. In that moment, he knew the deception had succeeded, and that their arrogance had fully blinded them. They think it's over, he muttered, teeth clenched, hatred blazing in his eyes. Witnessing the world mourn him while his enemies celebrated was agony. But that agony became fuel. After the burial, Stella and Mark dropped their masks in private. They hosted discreet gatherings, arranged lavish dinners, and raised glasses of expensive wine. Between soft laughter, they mocked the man who, to his final breath, had trusted them. Publicly, however, they remained the grieving heirs, united in preserving the legacy of the fallen patriarch. The media embraced the narrative, painting a portrait of noble loss while a monstrous plot remained hidden beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Isabella lived by the ticking of time. Back in the cramped room where she was held, she repeated her father's words like a prayer. 1 week. Just 1 week. Then I run and meet him at the Iron Bridge in Central Park. Fear still clung to her, but hope burned just as fiercely. When fragments of news from the cabin's television confirmed John's supposed death, she bit into her lip until it bled to keep herself from crying out. With every breath she reminded herself, they haven't won. Dad is alive. We will defeat them. The world believed the carefully staged illusion, and that belief was the most powerful weapon she and her father possessed. The scene had been set. The villains were already savoring their triumph, convinced the story had ended. But behind the curtain another act waited. One they never saw coming. The revelation hit like a lightning bolt, sending a wave of chaos through the courtroom. Gasps of disbelief erupted. Cameras flashed frenetically, and people jumped from their seats in shock. Stella's scream choked on her throat as she pressed her hands to her mouth, eyes wide as if confronting a ghost. This can't be real, she stuttered, trembling violently, leaning back in her chair. Mark's face drained of color, sweat beading on his brow. He scrambled to rise, nearly toppling, gripping the table for support. It's a trick. A lie, he shouted, panic cracking his voice, searching for validation from the crowd, but all eyes were fixed on them, filled with horror and disgust. John seized the microphone, his face a mask of fury previously unseen by the public. His voice, sharp and burning with indignation, reverberated through the chamber. For 2 months they mourned my death. For 2 months they believed my daughter was lost. And all the while it was a grotesque charade, orchestrated by the woman I trusted as my wife, and the brother I called family. Murmurs surged through the audience, whispers of shock and disbelief. John raised his hand, voice climbing like a roar. They plotted every detail, the fire, my daughter's kidnapping, even the slow, cruel poisoning I trusted to their treacherous hands. Stella sprang to her feet, her veil tumbling to the floor. Lies. It's all lies. I loved you, John. I took care of you. Her voice pierced the room, desperate, trembling, but her wide eyes betrayed fear. Mark tried to interject, shouting, It's fabricated. This is a trap to ruin us. Yet no one believed their excuses. John stepped forward, fury and heartbreak fueling every word. You mocked me. You laughed at my suffering while I wept at my daughter's grave. You twisted my love and trust to bury me alive. Isabella, her face glistening with tears, approached the microphone. Though she seemed delicate, her words sliced through the room like steel. I was there. They kept me hidden. I heard them laughing, celebrating my dad's death. They said they'd finish him too, to take everything. They don't deserve mercy. Her declaration hit like a hammer. Shouts of outrage erupted. Some stood in indignation, while journalists scrambled to capture every tear, every word. Screens lit up with damning evidence. Documents, audio recordings, and images collected by John and Isabella, including hidden cabin footage exposing Stella and Mark's confessions. Stella lunged forward, shrieking, This is manipulation. It's all false. But police stepped in, restraining her. Mark, pale and shaking, stammered, I'm innocent, she made this up. It's her fault. But the crowd saw no innocence, only exposed monsters. The room that had applauded moments before now hissed and jeered. Fingers pointing, some chanting for immediate imprisonment. John, face etched with betrayal, met them squarely, tears streaking his cheeks, voice steady and burning. You stole my nights of sleep. You stole my peace. You nearly destroyed my daughter. Today the world will see who you really are, murderers, thieves, traitors. Stella screamed, struggling against the cuffs, while Mark shivered, muttering hollow apologies. It was too late. The courtroom had witnessed the complete unraveling of the grandest deception ever staged. Cameras broadcast every moment live. Outside, the crowd roared in indignation, and the name John Harrison rose again. Alive, vindicated, and stronger than ever. In the eye of the storm, John stood firm, hand in hand with Isabella, their eyes fixed on the two who had betrayed them. Their unexpected return had shattered the web of lies, leaving no chance for deception to survive. The courtroom still buzzed with chaos as police escorted Stella and Mark away, hands bound, their faces pale with panic. Microphones were shoved toward them, cameras capturing every gasp, every scream, every moment of their unraveling. The public, stunned, struggled to process the revelation. But for John and Isabella, the noise outside was nothing more than a distant echo against the whirlwind of relief and triumph they carried within. As they exited the courthouse, they slid into the waiting car, finally free from prying eyes. Exhausted, Isabella rested her head on her father's shoulder, eyelids heavy and damp from tears, soon drifting into sleep. John held her close, the weight of responsibility mingling with gratitude. She was safe, she was alive. Back at the mansion, silence greeted them like an old, loyal friend. It was no longer the mournful hush of a staged death, but the calm of a home reclaiming its rightful life. John gently pushed open Isabella's bedroom door, and time seemed to pause. The room was untouched, as though the months of absence had been nothing more than a terrible dream. Dolls still lined the shelves, books sat neatly on the desk, and the blanket on the bed seemed to beckon her back. Tears pricked John's eyes as he ran his fingers across the furniture, touching memories that had been frozen in time. Isabella stepped in slowly, disbelief written across her features. Her feet brushed the soft carpet, hands tracing familiar objects as if to prove they were real. She picked up a doll, clutching it tightly, tears streaming freely. I thought I'd never see this again, Dad, she whispered, voice tight with emotion. John knelt before her, cupping her face gently. And I thought I'd never see you either, my daughter. But you're here now, and that's all that matters. Relieved and exhausted from months of fear and struggle, Isabella finally allowed herself to feel safe. She climbed into bed, pulling the blanket around her, and soon her breathing evened, soft and steady. John remained beside her, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her chest, each breath a reminder that life, after all, could still be beautiful. His hand stroked her hair as he whispered, "Sleep, my girl. I'm here now. No one will ever take you from me again." Phones rang incessantly in the living room. Journalists, lawyers, curious friends, all desperate for news of the scandal, but John ignored them. For the first time in months, nothing mattered more than his daughter sleeping safely at home. He moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit garden, the quiet night a balm after weeks of storm and fear. Deep down, he knew challenges lay ahead. Dealing with the press, restoring the company, confronting past betrayals. Yet, for this moment, he allowed the world to wait. Late into the night, John returned to his armchair by the bed, eyes open but heart calm. Each sound of Isabella's soft breathing was music, each small movement a reminder that life still held promise. The past, betrayal, poison, and mourning would not be forgotten. But now they had something greater, the chance to rebuild. "We won, Isabella," he murmured, voice low, knowing the battle had come at a high cost. Dawn arrived gently, spilling soft light across the room. Isabella woke, sleepy and tender-eyed, and ran into her father's embrace. John lifted her effortlessly, spinning her around as he once had in happier, simpler days. Laughter and tears mingled, and in that fleeting moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift. The room no longer held the ghosts of sorrow. It was a place of beginnings. The next morning the sky was clear, heralding a fresh start. Side by side, John and Isabella walked to the cemetery, each step heavy with memory yet light with hope. The iron gate creaked open, the cold wind whispering echoes of painful months gone by. Isabella gripped her father's hand, unwilling to let go. They stopped before the gravestone that bore her name. Isabella Harrison, rest in peace. John's chest tightened, staring at the stone that had imprisoned them both in grief and falsehood. Without a word, he placed his hands on the marble and pushed with all his might. The stone cracked and fell, fragments scattering across the ground with a sound that reverberated like thunder. An end to an era of lies. Isabella stepped back, stunned, then felt a rush of relief wash over her. The stone that had buried her alive was gone. She lifted her gaze to her father, voice trembling but strong. "I wasn't born to be buried, Dad. I was born to live." John drew her close, holding her with the strength of a heart being rebuilt. "And I'll be here to see you grow, every step, every dream, every victory. Nothing, not even death, will ever take you from me again." Pressing against him, Isabella felt her heartbeat align with his, a rhythm of an unbroken promise. Around them, the cemetery seemed to breathe anew. Where sorrow had once ruled, hope now bloomed. Leaves stirred gently in the wind, as if the universe itself had rewritten their story. Father and daughter remained entwined, tears and smiles mingling freely. John lifted his eyes toward the horizon. Those scars would remain, the betrayal of a brother, Stella's poison, the endless nights of mourning. He understood that life's meaning was not in losses. It was in the small hand holding his, in the courage of a daughter who had defied the impossible. Faith in a tomorrow had returned, and with it a rare, profound peace. Isabella smiled, and together they left the cemetery, leaving the shattered gravestone behind as a symbol of lies destroyed. Each step forward affirmed that the future belonged to them. Darkness had tried to consume them, but love, truth, and courage had spoken louder. Father and daughter walked on, ready to begin anew. Some stories do not end with death. They begin again when you choose to live. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel for more, leave a like to support, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.